Welcome to Sunny Star rating for the Darkin Finale expansion. In this video, I'm going to rate every single card released for this expansion from 1 to 5 stars, 1 being unplayable garbage and 5 stars being a meta-defining card. When the expansion was revealed, I made an Excel sheet and I asked other content creators to fill out their ratings as well. I had answers from Alan, former world champion, Silverfuse, and Aikado. So sometimes in this video, I might pull up their ratings to see what they thought about a card that I might have given 5 stars and they actually gave 1 star. In that Excel sheet though, I gave my first impressions, so you're gonna see me rate some cards completely different, because in this video, I'm going to give my final ratings, but I didn't want to update them in the sheet because it'd be kind of scummy with the other content creators giving their accurate ratings afterwards without context. So I'm just gonna do that in this video, and I'll post the Excel sheet for you to see later on. Alright, so let's get started with the very first champion, and that is Aatrox. I'm going to rate Aatrox 4 stars, and on the Excel sheet, with my first impression, he was a 2 star. I originally rated Aatrox 2 stars because I wasn't sure how his origin really worked, and I didn't see a champion that could only bring weapons and nothing else, no combat tricks, no nothing, just a champion and some weapons. I didn't see how that could function, but after doing some theory crafting, after doing some deck building, it turns out that Aatrox, when he levels, is just a 10-10 with Overwhelm, which is a solid win con in itself, but the weapons, at any point, if you have a follower equipped, the World Ender from Aatrox can assimilate that follower into the Darkin plus the weapon. They keep that Darkin weapon on them, so that makes it maybe playable with Forge, because you can forge a weapon and then later on, you transform that unit into the Darkin. They keep the weapon with the increased stats, and that's just really, really powerful. There are also a bunch of regions in the game, like the Masha, that are just happy playing all the units from their region, and then a couple of weapons to buff up their units, like the Vayne package. You can play the Zealot or whatever, the 2-3 that buffs all units that are equipped with a weapon. We have the 2-2, the 1-drop 2-2 that gets tough the first time you equip it with a weapon. Those are just solid enough cards to pick that region for their synergies, play a bunch of Darkin weapons, have Aatrox as your win con, plus that potential game-ending World Ender. It's going to be a champion that will likely see a lot more at Worlds on December 8th than I thought. Aatrox is definitely the strongest Darkin in my opinion. Stronger than Kayn, stronger than Varus. That is a hot take. However, even though the origin is a little bit disappointing, Aatrox glues that package together so well that I believe he's going to be a champion we see a lot of. Next, we're going to look at some Bandle City cards. And the first one for Bandle City is the Puzzling Signpost. I rated this one 4 stars because it is a Bandle City deny. However, the user that gets their spell denied gets the spell back to their hand, but the Puzzling Signpost also draws 1. So in Bandle City, that is actually pretty important. Bandle City really likes that playstyle of never running out of cards, and the Puzzling Signpost is a way to deny what your opponent is doing for a turn, probably because they get the spell back. It's not completely gone like with deny or right negation, but you draw 1, which is just exactly what Bandle City likes to do. Bandle City isn't about that hard removal. They're about temporarily getting rid of something. You'll get your unit mini-morph, but the unit isn't really gone. And Puzzling Signpost plays very much into that Bandle City playstyle. And the draw 1 on top is just really nice for decks to get their win con, their powerful cards together. It might not be 4 stars. It's gonna depend on what kind of deck you want to play this in. It might only be a 3 star. It's likely gonna be played in some mid-range decks. However, it is the fact that this card exists that's powerful. Even if the card itself was a 2-star card, because, you know, it costs 5 mana, you didn't draw, that still leaves the fact that Bandle City now has a deny that you need to play around at all costs. You can't just jam your World Ender, you can't just jam your Glorious Evolution, because you could lose that 10, 13, whatever mana, and you have to use that later. So just the existence of this card is powerful and is dangerous if you're playing against a Bandle City deck. Next up is Poro Stories. I rated Poro Stories 2 stars. I expect this card to be a lot better in the future. I don't know if you're following me on Twitter, but I retweeted a post about some changes they made for the next patch that got leaked. And apparently in those notes, it says that Heart of the Fluffed and Aurora Borealis now specify that they can only create or use Poro followers. Now that implies that there is a Poro champion coming. If that is true, if we get the Poro King in Runeterra, then maybe Poro Stories is suddenly a lot better. And I'm expecting, because you create so many Poros, I expect you to be able to play a Nora Poro deck, because that's +3 for Nora's level up. And Nora can actually be a win con. I know she's used a lot as like a control champion, because control likes to just randomly put minions on the board to attack with for some extra damage or to block with. Poro Stories is a card that could fit into an archetype like that very, very well. But for now though, with the way it is in the game, I can only give it 2 stars. The third Battle City card is Curious Changelings. 1 star. You guys know how much I love my Transform archetype, but it's never really been that strong, sadly. And the problem with that archetype is that you need to hit the Nexus to transform your unit at the round end. Now the problem with that is, first of all, you have to hit that Nexus. Now Battle City does have Pokestick, they do have the Poison Dart. There are definitely a lot of ways to do that. With Impact too, right? It's not impossible. It's not consistent though, that's a problem. Another problem is that when you do hit that Nexus, you need to protect the unit that wants to transform until the end of the turn. And that's also not always that easy to do. So we need cards that fix that problem. Either make it easier to hit the Nexus, or give us a way to protect our units better until the end of the turn so they can transform and you can get that Nakatak synergy, right? Curious Changeling does none of that. So it's still very good with Nakatak, right? Because if you transform a unit, the Curious Changeling transforms as well. You just suddenly get like 2 insanely huge, big static units. But the best use for this, because what I just mentioned is a little bit inconsistent, is the Wildclaw Transform spell. I forgot the name. I'll pull it up on the screen right here. It's the 6 mana, transform a unit into the 7/6 Overwhelm Wildclaw. And that is focus speed. So if you have that Curious Changeling on the field, you can use that spell and suddenly you have 2 7/6 Overwhelms or 2 8/6 Overwhelms with impact if you have a Nakatak. That is very strong. It is also a pretty expensive play, so you want to keep that transform stuff going with Nakatak to really make that worth it, because it's also, you know, very deck specific. It's an exciting card, very inconsistent though, and definitely doesn't change the problems that the Transform archetype has right now. And the final Bandle City card for this expansion is the long-awaited Darkin weapon, and that is the Staff. Also known as Balcox. So this is a 1-mana weapon that gives +0/+0 strike, refill 1 spell mana, and it has 1 impact. I hate weapons that give +0/+0. I think it's an absolute waste. There is no way you can make use of a weapon like that, because if you have a 3-mana unit and you put a 1-mana weapon on it that gives +0/+0, or God forbid a weapon that's even more than 1 mana, like one we'll get to a little bit later, your opponent can remove that unit, that 3-mana unit, with no additional investment, because the weapon doesn't give like 1 health or something. So if your unit that you're equipping has 3 health, it will still die to get excited, with or without that weapon. But because you spend 1 mana, that means you spend 4 total mana to buff up that unit. And the Darkin Staff itself is so unimpactful. You get impact, you get that strike, refill 1 spell mana, which is not bad, because the weapon can technically pay for itself, but you have to put it on an elusive to even get that strike multiple times. It's not completely unplayable, but it does take up a deck slot for an ultimately very unimpactful weapon. I don't see this weapon ever being used. However, Balcox, on the other hand, my favorite Darkin of all time, you can actually win games with this. I think this card is surprisingly good, mostly because it's in Bandle City. Bandle City doesn't really have any big consistent ways to end the game immediately. That's just not something Bandle City does. Bandle City wins the game by chipping at your Nexus the entire game until you're at like 5 HP, they chip you 1 more time, you go down to 2, and then they double Pokestick you and you're dead. That's what Bandle City does. It's about that small incremental damage. Balcox, however, if you play Balcox, you attack, you can play a Minimorph on your opponent while you're attacking. Suddenly Balcox gets 6 impact. That is just straight 6 damage to the face. If you have any strike spells, you can do that on the attack too. It's 12, you know, if you play single combat, that's +2 impact damage as well. So you're hitting your opponent, you're hitting with a single combat, that's 4 damage already just from playing a single combat. This is a big deal for Bandle City, but you do have to play a pretty bad weapon on top of it. So it's mostly about the implications that Bandle City gets a big potential game-ending card that made me rate the Darkin Staff 2 stars. Wish I could give more, but the weapon is just so unplayable. Next, we're going to that other +0/+0 weapon, Eye of God. 1 star. I really just don't like this at all, and the fact of the matter is that Illaoi is still only 1 attack, so she dies to Quietus. It's a 4-mana champion that just gets easily removed by a 1-mana card. That's just terrible, and Eye of God does not help with that in the slightest. I will say though, this card makes me pretty excited to play Demacia with Vayne plus Illaoi decks, because you can tumble on Illaoi, you can give Illaoi that Eye of God, and then suddenly you get like a 3/3 tentacle. That is actually pretty powerful. However, 2 mana for +0/+0 in a region that has had a hard time protecting their units. You know, you can still pick Demacia to be a little better at protecting your units, but Bilgewater just doesn't offer much in that regard. So Eye of God, I hate to say it, because I think Illaoi is a pretty interesting champion, will remain at 1 star. And the second and final Bilgewater card for this expansion is the Wily Newtfish. This is a very interesting card that just slightly misses the mark in some regards. This would be a fantastic card if it didn't draw one immediately, but instead did it a turn after, just like the Darkin Harpoon, just like Twisted Fate's Champion spell. I keep forgetting the names, but I'll pull them up on the screen. This card, it's good for Nami, but it's just bad because it's a 3-mana 1/3 and it draws immediately. So if you're attacking on 3, you draw a card, it's fleeting. It needs to be a 3-mana spell for you to even, or less, for you to even use that. And that's just really, really awkward. So Nami loves this card. I don't love this card. It's a 1 star. I will probably experiment with this deck in like a Twisted Fate Bard deck with some treasures maybe. But aside from that, I would avoid this card at all costs. Also interesting to note that the other content creators all rated the Bilgewater cards 1 star, except Alan, who rated Wily Newtfish 2 stars. So some optimism from the world champion, but overall I think the Bilgewater card are near unplayable. And next we're going to look at the Demacia cards, starting with the Champion's Strength. I rated this card 4 stars. This card is obviously quite insane, right? It's 8 mana, give everything +4/+4 and attack again. That is basically what it says. It's like a super rally. It's a super for Demacia. All rallies got nerfed, so that means this card is even better because Golden Aegis and Relentless Pursuit are just worse than they were before, right? The problem for me is that for 8 mana, you need to have a board that is big enough to make use of this. Still, you get that +4/+4, so any attack you're going to do in a arena like Demacia is going to be meaningful. But getting this card denied, getting your units removed, it's all so awkward in my eyes. And I don't see a Demacia deck that loves this kind of playstyle right now. Like we had Scouts, we had the Bandle City rally deck that also went really wide with Yordles. And this card would be perfect for that. Like I said, after the rally nerfs, after the Yordles in Arms nerf, this card just became a lot better because the better options are gone. This is a more expensive option and much more open to that counterplay. But that's why I rated it 4 stars. However, Alan rated this 10 stars. You know, from 1 to 5, he rated it 10 stars. And Sylvius rated it 6 stars. Aikado rated it 5 stars. So clearly they all think this card is completely insane. So I am probably pretty off on this one. I'm rating it 4 stars though. I'm sticking with it because I think there is some awkwardness in playing an expensive card that needs to have a board. But clearly, you know, if the other content creators think it's this insane, it's pretty likely that we're gonna see a ton of this card in your Demacia archetypes. Next is the cutest card of the expansion, and also my new wallpaper, but instead of Citria riding the trusty Ramhound, it's Fiddlesticks riding the trusty Ramhound. I rated this one 3 stars. I will immediately say that this is actually a 5-star card. However, because it is Elite Synergy, and I don't see Elites being inherently very strong this expansion, I'm gonna stick with my 3 stars because Elites need more than just a good 1-drop to really get the ball rolling for them. It is an archetype with potential, you know, it also works great with the Champion's Strength. More than great, it will be insane, it'll win literally every single game for Elites. And a 1-drop is exactly what they needed. They had Citria, they had the 2/2 that creates a tattered banner, and the Trusty Ramhout is just infinitely better than those cards. But still, Elites, they need a little more love. It's just not quite there. So if Elites get any card at all that will help them even a little bit, Trusty Ramhout is immediately the strongest card in that deck. This is a chip for Demacia, and Demacia uses stats much better than most other regions. So a 3-3 will go a very, very long way. Next, we have the Petricite Charger. Originally, I was pretty excited for this card. It's a 3-mana 0-4 that doesn't take damage from spells. However, not taking damage from spells means it still dies to Quietus. It still dies to Vengeance, I guess. I mean, if your opponent's paying 6 mana to kill a 3-mana unit, you're pretty happy, especially if you're Demacia. But the Formidable Archetype, it's just not there. It still takes damage in combat. So sadly, I have to rate this one 1 star. The Formidable Archetype just needs a lot more love. And they need more Broadwing cards to really be good. And also for me to really want to build synergies for that, like more health buffs and stuff. It's awkward. I don't like Formidable. It's kind of boring too. I like Galio. I like some of the other formidable support cards like Gorlith, you know, the expensive boys that do something really cool with that keyword. But this is just, it's not it. It's new, it's unique, but it doesn't do it for that archetype. And lastly, we have Roar of Acacia. Originally, I rated this one 3 stars. However, after doing some deck building, I upped that to 4 stars. This is the prime card that you want to pair with Aatrox. You build your Aatrox Demacia deck, you put in all the good Darkin weapons that you can find, you put in all the weapon synergy cards from Demacia that you can find, and you're still gonna run into scenarios where you have more weapons than units. And to fix that, all you need is 1 Roar of Acacia. Immediately you summon 2 3/2s, and they take a weapon from your hand. So this is better than the Piltover spell. The 6 mana summon 2 3/3s. This is obviously -1 health, but they take a weapon with them, and you're not going to play this card outside of weapon-based decks. Extremely strong, and will actually fix a lot of issues for not only the Aatrox deck that I thought was going to be pretty awkward to play, because who needs that many weapons? Well, Roar of Acacia does, and also for the Weapon Masters, because how often do you play Vayne Jax, and then after like 6 turns or whatever, all your units have died, and you're just stuck with 7 weapons in your hand that you can't use? Well, Roar of Acacia can immediately make use of that. Very, very powerful card that I think a lot of people are actually sleeping on. And next, we're gonna look at the Targon champion for this expansion, Kayle. I rated Kayle 3 stars. Her breakpoints on when she gets the next power-up are really cute, because it's like in League of Legends, where at level 6, she levels up, her ultimate makes her more powerful. At level 11, she levels up, she gets that Overwhelm, and at 16 empowered, she gets that double attack, which will just immediately end the game. It's very like in League of Legends. If you ever played Kayle or against a Kayle in League, you'll know that when Kayle levels up her ultimate, she is going to be a lot stronger. Those are her real power spike. It's really cool to see that implemented in Runeterra this way. However, those numbers, 6, 11, and 16, are a little bit awkward in the card game, because at level, if you have Kayle and powered 16, you probably already won. If you need to wait for the round to start for Kayle to have 11 plus power, well, again, it's a round start effect, so that makes it really easy for your opponent to just say, hey, I'm just gonna remove your Kayle right now before the round ends, so you don't get that level up, right? And then you need to start over. She does have that aura where her attack is increased for each time an ally attack with increased power, but that's harder to do than it might seem. I did a lot of deck building with Kayle. I think she's actually more interesting than people give her credit for. People call her pretty boring. I like Targon. I'm a Targon fanboy, and Kayle does excite me to some level, but that attacking with increased power is difficult. For that reason, Kayle's supporting card will likely see more play than Kayle herself. It's going to be the Illaoi story all over again. Illaoi spawn card, think Eye of Nagakeboros, think the Tentacle Smash, think the Riptide Sermon. All of those cards were played in so many decks, but Illaoi herself, nowhere to be seen. Expecting much of the same for Kayle. Starting with the Celestial Blessing, which in my opinion is a 4-star card, and I originally had this at 3. I upped it to 4 because of all the actually, never mind. I upped it to 5 stars even Yeah, I was thinking to myself, this doesn't sound right. This card is insane. It's much better than I gave it credit for. Giving something +1/+1 to win combat, and then giving something in your hand +1/+1 as well, so you immediately get that benefit later on. You can even make some of your champions immune to Quietus, like that Victor, right? If I play Victor Riven, I would love a card like this, so I can just drop my Victor safely against a lot more Shadow Isle deck. There are just so many upsides. It's like Pill Cascade, but even better if you have units in your deck that care about these stats. I don't really care about drawing an additional card if I can just make sure that the next card I'm going to play is going to be even stronger because of that Celestial Blessing. Like imagine playing Demacia with Celestial Blessing. You put this on your 3-drop. You play this on your Faded Dragon. I forgot the Wounded White Flame. You play this on your Wounded White Flame. Immediately becomes a 4/5 permanently, and then you give the other end to your Shyvana. Shyvana comes down as a 4/5, attacks, becomes a 5/6. You're probably just leveling that Shyvana right away. Super, super powerful, and so many options. This is a card to look out for. It's going to appear in many more decks than just Faded, just Kill. It's quite crazy for the consistency's sake, which is all card games are really about, right? And then we have Divine Judgment, kills champion spell. Much like in League of Legends, her ultimate, she makes your card invulnerable for one single round. It's Unyielding Spirit, but balanced, I guess, because Unyielding Spirit was broken, then it was unplayable, and now we have Divine Judgment. Interesting card. I like the fact that it also says give all allies +1/+0 this round. That makes it so that if you're attacking... I'm comparing these cards to a lot of Demacia decks because I think, again, Targon just goes best with Demacia. But if you're somehow playing Kill Poppy, which actually does have a lot of synergy, you can Divine Judgment your Poppy and you give all your small Yordles +1 attack. And that is actually a really, really meaningful attack. That's a blowout if I've ever seen one. So Divine Judgment, while it has its uses, I think it will only be good as the champion spell. You don't want to main deck this because it's way too reactive. If you're protecting your unit, that means that the other part, the give all allies +1/+0, will often just straight up be wasted. It's a 2-star card. It's good. It has its uses, but overall, it will be way too conditional for it to see any consistent play and be consistently good value. Every new archetype needs a 1-drop, and for the Empowered Kill archetype, it's the Divine Clerk. This card is a 2/1, and at Empower 3, it has Lifesteal. This card is crazy. This card is insanely good. 4 stars. I would give this 5 stars, but again, from deck building, I have noticed that you can't always consistently increase the attacks in the way that you want to for your card. Unless you're playing Bard, unless you're playing every single card in this archetype that buffs the stats, which I don't think you want to do, it's still really, really good. But just not 5-star material, because it doesn't just automatically go into every Targon deck. And Targon already has really, really, really good 1-drops that are also quite specific. Spacey Sketcher, the Dustbringer, the Lunari Dustbringer that gives you the pedal in your hand. Super good. Some of the best 1-drops in the game. And Divine Clerk goes straight into that category, but it is conditional. You need to do something to make use of the effect. And not every deck can do that. Up next is the Lawkeeper, and this is a card I thought was a lot better originally, but I adjusted my rating and I gave it 2 stars. This is a good card with Bart. It's not so good with Kill and her buffing card. This is slightly too late. Stun enemies with less power than me. You need to really, really buff this up to make use of it. And the thing with the Kill archetype is that you're most likely going to be holding the line because you get so many units that are just big enough and can hold the line that you shouldn't need a Lawkeeper, right? That's why Kill can most likely get away with not running an insane amount of interaction, because you have elusive blockers, you have really, really big stats that can just stop, halt anything your opponent is trying to do. So do you really need to stun all their stuff to win? You have cards with Overwhelm like your Kill, you have elusives like the Aspect of Justice, like the Winged Messenger. It really covers all the bases. So Lawkeeper seems pretty redundant, and you need to do too much work to actually make it good. I'm rating 2 stars. I'm sticking with that. I wish it was a little better, but I don't see it. And then we have the Aspect of Justice Mihira. This is a build-around card, but the build-around goes straight into that Kill deck. You need to have this Empowered 5 because you want the stats to be big enough so it can survive hits, so it can survive removal, but you also want to keep it around so that it can have that round end effect. You want to keep giving your allies in hand and play +1/+1. That is a really powerful effect. This is a 5-mana card. It comes down a little bit late, but if you have a board, if you have units in your hand, like I would expect you to play your empowered decks, it's better than it seems. I was pretty down on this card at first because I was like, well, it takes too long for the effect to happen. It's a 5-mana card. It's only a 1/1, but still, for this deck, it's going to be another big threat that your opponent needs to remove, and they just don't always have room for that. So Mihira is I would give this 3.5 stars, but it is a 3-star card for me. Next is the other threat that your opponent will have to deal with very, very early, and that is the Winged Messenger. At 2/4, that doesn't do anything, but as soon as you give it +1 attack, it gets elusive. And elusive with 4 health is insane. It's really, really, really stupid. This slots straight into the Zoe Teemo deck. It fits straight into any kill deck you're playing because this will be your earliest win con. Your opponent deals with this, or they're gonna take 3 or more damage every single turn. One buff to land on this, one of the Celestial Blessing, and you're good to go. This card needs to eat removal immediately, which makes it all the more likely that your Mihira and your Kill, maybe even your Zolani later on, are ready to pop off. I expect Winged Messenger to be played in a ton of different decks, not just kill decks, not just Zoe Teemo, but anything that can slightly buff attack of something. This will be the first card they look at. Purifying Flames, another hand buffing card. This one is harder to play. I'm giving it 2 stars, simply because there is a big investment you have to make. It's 4 mana for +5 in stats total. That is very good. However, the tempo loss you get from this, I don't think is quite worth it. I wouldn't give it 1 star, because if you have a Zoe, you could skip turn 1, skip turn 2, and then on turn 3, you play Purifying Flames, you make your Zoe a 4/4, you play the Zoe, and then you have a 4/4 elusive that needs to eat removal. You give another card in your hand +2/2, like that Winged Messenger, like that Seraphic Wyvern. I didn't talk about that card yet, or the Mihira, the Aspect of Justice, or the Kale, and then suddenly that's a lot more for your opponent to deal with. The stats go a long way in Targon, the region with Spell Shield, so it has some uses. I would be surprised if this card saw no play at all, but it's not going to be the star of a deck. It's not going to be like, oh no, they just play Purifying Flame, so I guess I lose, right? Not that type of card. And the other card that I was mentioning is the Seraphic Wyvern. This is a 4-star card. Honestly, it could be a 5-star card, but dragons would need to be a little bit better for that, or you would need to have strike spells in Targon. If Targon had strike spells, this would be the easiest 5-star of my life. However, Fury, it can proc its own effect. It eats 1 buff, you get Overwhelm on a 5 health unit. Super powerful. Targon loves this kind of card. Stats are premium. Dragon decks are going to love this even more. Super, super good card that is definitely actually going to revitalize the dragon archetype. And finally, for Targon, is Zolani the Blood Weaver. This is the most exciting card, more exciting than Kill, in the entire Targon package. The whole story around Zolani, I'm honestly a little bit sad that he's not a champion, but in this form, he's basically like a mini champion. So if Zolani were to become a Runeterra exclusive card, champion card, I would be all for it. This looks fantastic. So cool. But again, while I was deck building, it became really, really hard to find enough cards to empower so that they will buff up the Zolani later. It's good with Viego and Mists. It's not even that good with Hallowed because you're only buffing 1 unit, and with Gwen 2, that's not a lot. And in the Targon package, you need to actively use cards that buff your units to actually feed the Zolani. Bard, however, would be insane with Zolani. Bard Kale, very playable deck. Zolani will slot right into that, so you will likely be more than a 2/2. She gets extra stats for all those chimed units that died, and this is a win con. It will win the game more than Kill will in that archetype, most likely. So I want to rate this higher than it actually is. I'm giving it 3 stars. Too specific in the deck building. I want to give it higher, but it's probably even worse than a 3 stars. I'm sorry, Zolani. I was a believer, but after deck building, I just don't see it. And that was the Targon package, so we're gonna move over to the Shadow Elf card, starting with Redeemed Prodigy. I gave this card 3 stars. This seems insane when you first look at it, but then you take a closer look and you realize, oh, it only does something when you're attacking. It doesn't have the Hallowed keyword. It's a 2/2 instead of a 3/1 with a Fearsome at the other 2 mana slot. It's worse than the current 3-1, but it will probably be better than any other 2-drop that Hallowed will ever get. So if you really need that 2-drop in your deck for Hallowed, this is it. But it's not as good as it seems. It's a little too specific. Having to do it on the attack, it will probably die because it's in Shadow Isle, so you only get 1, 2-1. That's just most likely 2 extra damage. You can't even put the Ephemeral on the left to get that Hallowed buff to make it more awkward for your opponent to block. It's just, it doesn't come together as nicely as you want it to. So, still good. It's playable. 3 stars. Probably worse than that, though. Next is the Deathless Knight. 2 stars. I adore this card. This is one of the coolest cards they printed, and I really hope they do more of this kind of stuff. But it's just... the Ephemeral archetype, the other cards you need to play to make this good are not quite good enough to main deck and build your strategy around. It's very good with the Oblivious Islander, extremely good even. Getting this down to 5 mana and giving it +1/+1 is really, really powerful. We also have the new Ionia card, the Black Flame, which if you attack will just bring this back as a 6/6 every time. I love this. As far as YouTube content goes, this is 5 stars. But as a playable card in actual... you know, on the tier list, it's 2 stars. Probably even a 1 star. But I could see this as a one-of in some cute ephemeral strategies. But aside from that, not really. Shape of Fear. I gave this 2 star. Every other content creator gave this 1 star. I am still on some Viego Copium. I think there could be something there. This is really good in that deck. It's also pretty good in Viego Evelyn. Viego Kindred also really likes this card. But those decks have been rather unplayable since the Viego nerf. So it's 2 stars, but... more realistically, it's actually 1 star. Shurima, we have the Acolyte's Reliquary. 1 star. I love this card. This is one of my favorite cards in this set. But it's... the Acolytes, they're a little bit bad. They're a little bit inconsistent. It's really nice to actually have consistent ways of getting multiple of them and buffing them. But the fact this shuffles into the top 5 cards of your deck makes it weird. I don't see this deck working. You need to play that landmark, and then you get the unit, so you're developing a landmark that doesn't do anything until you play that Acolyte. There's not enough draw in Shurima to really make this worth it consistently, but it's still... I'm gonna play the hell out of this card. With Ziggs, with Zillion, with Zera. I love my landmark archetypes, but this is gonna be fun. It's also probably gonna be really bad and inconsistent. Voidgate. This is an insane card with Evelyn. What happens if you play the Voidgate with Evelyn is you play a Husk Generator. That's 3 keywords into your deck. Then you eat that Husk with a minion. The Husk dies, so that's 3 more keywords into your deck. And then because that unit is summoned at the same time as it dying, it absorbs those keywords, and that counts as summoned 3 more of that keyword into your deck. So if you roll Spell Shield once, you will most likely just give your entire deck Spell Shield, right? I don't know the functionality of this card. I don't know if they overwrite each other, like if the same keyword can land on the same unit twice. If that's the case, then impact gets pretty funny. But I'm gonna assume that if a unit already has Spell Shield, it will look for the next unit to give Spell Shield to. That being said, it's still a 1-star card, because Evelyn just hasn't really playable. This would imply that you need to play Evelyn Kaisa, and I have tried to make that Star Guardian deck work multiple times. It never actually did anything but lose me games. Super fun card that I will be playing around with, but not consistent, not good. Just a meme, really. Just a meme for us content creators. So I'll be playing it, but you're not going to see it high on the tier list. And the final Shurima, another landmark support card, is going to be the Rock Bear Shepherd. And this is a 5-star card. This card is insane. It's a 1/3 that brings immediate value with the Hibernating Rock Bear landmark. So in 3 turns, you're also going to get a 5/5. And it has the additional effect that every time you summon an ally, you advance the landmark with the highest cooldown. So this can be played in the Sun Disc to not have to play that 2/2 that advances the countdown by 2 for the Sun Disc. It will just turbo that specific archetype, and you can maybe play like Nasus or Renekton in it even, 2 normally pretty inconsistent cards. But with the Rock Bear Shepherd, I'd be down to play around with it, honestly. And not only that, if you don't have any other landmark, it will just get that 5/5 down earlier. It's also insane with Azir attacking and getting all those Sand Soldiers. You will just turbo all your landmarks. This card is simply crazy. It does so much for not only landmark decks, but also those Sun Discs. Maybe there are other like Frozen Thrall decks that I'm not thinking about. Maybe it's playable there. I think this card is crazy, and you're going to see a lot of it. All right, next, we're going to go to the 3rd champion, and this one I'm nervous about. I didn't do a lot of deck building with Rise just yet, But it's such a insanely difficult puzzle that Rise gives you. It's like, here, there's Exodia, there's landmarks, there's the deck building with the spells, there's my champion spell that makes it seem like I don't want any other followers in my deck. There are so many different angles, and I don't know how to figure this one out without actually playing it in the game to know how it feels. I'm still going to give Rise 5 stars. Every single part, every single aspect is difficult to wrap my head around. However, it all individually sounds so damn powerful. I don't believe that this card has any shot at being bad. It's just a matter of time until somebody figures it out and we have a tier 0 deck. I'm convinced. Rise will eventually give us a tier 0 deck and it will suck to play again. Nobody likes getting OTK'd. Nobody likes those I'm just gonna survive until I can kill you in one shot type of playstyles. But come on, we all know there's going to be something. There's somebody with a brain big enough to figure this out, and we're all gonna hate it. I will also say that from the other content creators, Silverfuse gave this 3 stars, Alan gave it 5 stars, and Akado gave it 2 stars. Now, important here is Alan loves these type of playstyles. Alan also has access to the card because he is prepping with another top 16 contender for Worlds. So the top 16 has access to the cards to prepare for Worlds, and they were able to bring a scrim partner. So Alan is a scrim partner. He was world champion last year. So if Alan already played with Rise and he gives it 5 stars, I think there's gotta be something there. I will say though, I gave Rise 5 stars before I even knew his rating, so I am also a believer, and clearly I have the mindset of a world champion. Rise is a champion to look out for, and it's only a matter of time until somebody cracks the code and creates a tier 0 deck. All right, and then we have 4 regions left, and we're gonna start with Freljord, Woolly Snail Moth. 1 star. I don't get this card. There's nothing here. It has the empowered keyword, sure, that's kind of new. Terrible card. I honestly don't know why this was printed. Pouty Poro, 2 stars. This is an insane card. This is an insane card for Poros, but the Poro archetype is still bad. Getting a 3/3 with Tough, Overwhelm, and Regen is really, really good. That's 2 Poros decks, and you have that, right? But who wants to play Poros? If you're playing Poros, you're doing it to OTK or like non-interactive win with daring Poros. That's the playstyle. Pouty Poro doesn't really fit there. Still good. Still really good if Poros were playable. It's much like the Trusty Ramhound, right? If Elites were good, Trusty Ramhound was 5 stars. If Poros were good, this would be 5 stars. Next is a Ram card, Wild Mysticism. I rated this 3 stars. All the other content creators did more or less the same. Yeah, Aikado 3 stars, Silverfuse 2 stars, but Alan, world champion, rated this 5 stars. And that is really, really interesting because Alan is the one guy out of these other content creators that actually plays Ram decks a lot. So I think his judgment is worth more than ours. And I could easily be wrong here. I wanted to rate this 4 stars originally, but after looking at Catalyst and the way Ram decks are played right now, they care more about that heal than a 2/2. On the other hand, this might spawn an archetype that cares more about ramping with units. I have tried to play a deck with the Feral Mystic multiple times. It was a ramp deck that actually cared about units that wanted to get to turn 10 and then play their Feral Mystic. Play, I believe it was War Mothers. So a deck that actually wants units on the field. It had Trundle, it had some Trolls. It's a long time ago. It's somewhere on the YouTube. I really like the deck. I love ramping and actually caring about your units, but it was a bad deck, obviously. Feral Mystic, Wild Mysticism would fit perfectly in the deck and would make it a lot better. Would actually make it very playable. Tier 3 deck, I think. So I want to know what Alan has to say about this because I don't have context, but I could see this card being very good. You also don't want multiple ramp cards. Like if you go over the top with ramping, you're eventually going to reach 10 mana and then your other ramp cards do nothing. So you don't want to play Wild Mysticism, Catalyst, there's another one that I forgot the name of that gives +2 health and ramps a mana crystal. You don't want all of those in the same deck. You want like 3 of one card or maybe like 3 Wild Mysticism, 1 Catalyst, something like that, right? To make it consistent to ramp. It'll be good. I expect this card to see play, I just don't know where. But on paper, it's a good card. Here to help, 1 star. This is one end of Twin Discipline for Freljord, but at the same time, we have Troll Chant at the same slot, which is a much, much better card. You get the upside if your unit is damaged, but then you'd have to play a Braum or Vladimir archetype, and those have historically been very bad, so I don't expect here to help change that at all. 1 star. Darkin Spear, 4 stars. Now, I was saying, if you saw my first impression video, that I was really hoping for Freljord to get a weapon that likes to be forged, a weapon with direct impact on the board. We didn't get that. This is +0, +2, and it buffs the top unit on your deck, so it does nothing for when you're actually attacking. Which makes sense, because if it did that, giving something +2 health and getting immediate value when you play it or when you attack, that will make it very broken. Still, while it's not good with Ornn and the Forge archetype, it's not bad either. It's just not insane. It's not gonna suddenly make Ornn like a super good champion or anything. It's not like, hey, here's the cheap weapon you've been waiting for from Freljord to make Ornn good. No. But I have to look past that. I have to look past how much I wanted Ornn to be good and still say that, yeah, this is a very good weapon and it will actually make Freljord a better region. Freljord just needs some early game to be good. If Omenhawk was a 2-1, it will be the best card in the game. It would single-handedly make Freljord a good region again. That's how desperate they are for early game units. And if they get that, their tools are easily good enough to make the region playable. I don't know why Riot isn't doing that. I don't know why they're not giving us good early game cards for Freljord. Maybe they're scared of how frustrating it could be to play against Frostbites. And speaking of Frostbites, Darkin Spear will also activate Unforgiving Cold, which is a card in Freljord. A very, very good card in Freljord that has delivered me many blowouts. So Darkin Spear will only make that better. 4 stars. Navori Longtail, 2 stars. This card, on paper, seems really weird. It wants to be played in a go wide strategy where it can help you going wide by getting 2 units at once. And it can also buff up your board that is already wide because, you know, you want to get as many buffs as possible. Those strategies for Ionia have been good in the past, especially with the Bard Ahri deck, for example. There have been some other elusive strategies that this would be very good in. But as a 3-mana card, it's just not good right now. An archetype like that doesn't exist right now. And I don't think this card is going to spawn an archetype like that. So 2 stars. Has potential in the future, but right now it just seems very bad. Twin Wind Technique, 5 stars. And that hurts me, because I hate giving Ionia cards 5 stars. Especially one like this, that's just going to be super frustrating to play against. You pick a follower and you summon an exact ephemeral copy. That's good for some of your impactful units that you play from Ionia, but it's even better if you're stunning your opponent's unit that wants to attack, and maybe they have another unit that wants to attack, and then they can't because you also have an ephemeral copy of the unit you just stunned. You stop an attack completely. This seems stupidly good. Luckily, it's slow speed. It kind of has to be, right? Because we don't want another Tail of the Dragon that can potentially summon an even bigger unit. But the playmaking potential and the screwing your opponent over potential that this card has all in one is ridiculous. I am going to hate playing against this, and I was just looking, you know, inside myself, like how frustrated would I be to play against this card? And that's where that 5-star rating comes from, because I think I would be beyond frustrating getting my entire game plan halted by Twin Wind Technique. Hate this card. 5 stars. The Darkin Fan. Now, another 5-star card for Ionia. This one, I'm a little more okay with. This one gets 5 stars because it's a good attack. It's a good effect, rather. It also is good to give your Ionia unit +1 attack. Believe it or not, Ionia actually generally has a pretty hard time giving meaningful stat boosts to their units. They have very good conditional or temporary effect, like Twin, like the Wuju style now, for example. That's 1 turn. But can you imagine just permanently giving Master Yi this attack? Permanently giving Zed this attack? Suddenly, it's like, it's really good. And not only that, it also activates your weapon synergies like the Momentous Choice. Ionia has a lot of very, very good weapon synergies that are... They have been unplayable or inconsistent, especially with the Hookmaster nerf. I remember playing a Master Yi deck way back when the first Darkin expansion was released, and I was just looking for good weapons to put in, because I really wanted to activate Momentous Choice, for example. It just wasn't possible because they only had the Hookmaster, and they had that flow weapon, which was just... It was just bad, let's be honest. Darkin Fan has good text, has +1 attack, which is fine for Ionia because they can't protect their unit. 1 attack goes a long way in that region. And later on, you can transform it into Pra, the Breachwalker, which is also just a game-winning unit most of the time. Very, very good card. And the last Ionia card, man, Ionia hit the jackpot this expansion. The Black Flame. 4 stars. Very, very close to 5 stars. I'm giving it 4 because I need to see what this plays like in-game. There are some awkward scenarios with Black Flame where you want to play this on like your Z, so you have to play Z on 3, play this on 2, you remove your unit. If you can't attack, then you don't get the unit, so there are some awkward scenarios that made me give this 4 stars ultimately, but the effect itself is absolutely 5-star worthy. It just depends on if there is that card that this will be insane with. I personally really like putting this on the new revealed kitten, the Cunning Kitten, that if it's created, it gets +2/+1 and draws you a card. We'll get to that one later. It's good with Kennen, it's good with Zed, it's good with Teemo, it's good with Seinen, it's good with any summon effect, really. This has the potential to be a game-breaking card. It's just going to be a matter of time until we figure out what that card is, because we will see it sooner or later. And then we have 2 Noxus cards. First off is the Crimson Pigeon. This is a crazy good card. It's a 1-mana 2/2 that turns into a 3/3, but it's only really playable in decks that don't care about that ping for 1, and that is Braum, Vladimir decks, and those are bad. People are saying that this is a very good aggro deck. Or aggro card. I don't really see it. A lot of those aggro cards have 1 health, and if you ping those, they die, and they don't get their effect. Like your Legion Saboteur is dead. It doesn't even get their effect. So I have a hard time really seeing how this works in an aggro deck. But if you have an aggro deck that can get pinged, like with the Crimson Disciple and stuff, suddenly it's like the best card in the game. So in that scenario, 5-star card. As it is right now, with those decks being as bad as they are, sticking with 2 stars. Next is the Reveler's Feast. This is another aggro card. And an aggro card that is playable beyond just Vladimir. You deal 2 to an ally to give everything +2/+0. It's like a super vision. You don't even need to discard it. You don't need discard synergies. You just deal 2 to a unit. You deal 2 to your Disciple, and your whole board gets +2/+0 this round. This is a 3-star card. I would give this higher, but I had a hard time building a deck around this effect. A lot of aggressive units only have 2 health, and you don't want to just kill your unit to get this effect off, right? So another thing is that if your opponent plays around this, they can just block that unit that you're trying to deal 2 to. Or rather, block everything except the unit that will die if they deal 2 to it. Like, let's say they attack with 4 units. They all have 3 health except 1 2/1. You block everything except that 2/1. Your opponent can't play Reveler's Feast ever, and you will likely trade up into their board. So, good aggro card. Maybe I'm just not enough of an aggro player to know how this would feel. So I'm sticking with 3 stars. There's potential. I just don't see it in the current metagame. And then finally, we go to Piltover, the last region, 4 cards remaining. Caustic Rift is the first one. This card is 5 stars. I don't know why they printed this. Piltover has never really received AoE. And that's, by the way, that's the reason why I'm rating this 5 stars. Piltover got that Heimerdinger Rocket, where it deals 3 to 1 unit and 1 to everything else. And Riot even said, yeah, we're not really big on giving Piltover AoE because that's supposed to be one of their weaknesses. But anyway, we're printing Caustic Rift like 2 expansions later. Here you go, have fun with it. It's Seraphine support, so it has to be broken, right? The flow part is, you can ignore that. Very often, it will be active, it won't be active, it doesn't matter. You're gonna play this card when it's necessary. One mana more or less doesn't matter. You're not playing this for the discount. And it's a good way to stop aggro. It's gonna be good in Conservatory decks. It's good in Swain decks. It's gonna do so much for that archetype. You probably never run this as a 3-of. If you run this as a 3-of, then you do suddenly care about activating that flow because you don't want to pay 3 mana for this all the time, right? But as a 1-of or a 2-of, it's just gonna be backbreaking for some decks. 1 or 2 is enough to just increase the win rate of a deck like that because there's something to play around, because they suddenly have AoE, and yeah, aggro's gonna be sad playing against Seraphine decks even more. Encore is a 2-mana burst speed spell. I don't see a way to main deck this. I'm giving it 2 stars. If you create this card though, you're gonna be very happy. You create this card, Seraphine doubles it, then she doubles the 2 costs, you create it as well. It's, yeah, specifically in certain scenarios, it's very, very powerful, but overall, I think you're gonna be sad if you main deck this. You can't be just like, hey, let me just play this turn and see what happens, because the card you get is fleeting. It's too specific. It's gonna be stuck in your hand a little too often. And I think turboing Seraphine isn't really something you have to build your deck around, because if you play all the good cards, and sometimes you run 1 or 2 copies instead of 3, then your Seraphine is going to be level turn 7 consistently anyway. You don't need Encore for that. Acoustician, 1 star. I'm very close to giving this 2 stars. Alan gave it 4 stars. Aikado gave it 3 stars. Me and Silverfuse gave it 1 star. I gave it 1 star because it's a 3-mana 2/3 in Piltover, a region that has a hard time actually striking. If your opponent isn't prepared to deal with this though, it can generate backbreaking amounts of value. If you play this or your opponent passes on 3, or they play a 1/4 like Seraphine on 3 and you play the Acquisition, you attack with it, suddenly you're ahead by miles. Then it's a really, really good card. That being said, we're not in Demacia, we're not in Targon. You can't just protect this unit and expect it to get value in Piltover. So there are a lot of synergies, but the stats on the card that it's on are simply too weak for me to consider this in my deck. And lastly, we have the Cunning Kitten. Arguably my favorite card of this set because this is a printer card. And if there's one thing I love, it's printing cards. Kitten, when printed, draws 1 and gets +2/+1. I'm gonna play my Evil Imperfectionist on this. I'm gonna play my Counterfeit Copies on this. I'm gonna play my Black Flame on this. I'm gonna play Glorious Evolution. I'm gonna be super happy. This card is a 5-star card for YouTube content creation. As a actual playable archetype, I think there is something there. I think you can play this in very specific archetypes that like to print. I think those archetypes, actually, people don't give them enough love. I know I'm on Copium, but I've played these decks so much that I really understand their ins and outs. And this is the same as Time Bombs. The part that matters here is that draw 1. Time Bombs are good to print because they draw 1. They replace themselves. So every time you play a Time Bomb, you have a chance of getting another Time Bomb. The problem, of course, is that in Time Bomb Printer you play Zillion, and you get 4 Time Bombs in your deck. The printer is ready to go. All you need to do is draw 1, and print them. In the Cunning Kitten archetype, you need to hold this into your hand. You need to play the Evil Imperfectionist and print it that way. However, Piltover also has the Iterative Improvement. And if you play the Iterative Improvement on a Cunning Kitten, you increase the consistency of your deck. And instead you get a 5/5 that draws 1. That is very, very good. You can play this on 2. You skip turn 1. You play Cunning Kitten on turn 2. You go into turn 3. You play Iterative Improvement on the Cunning Kitten. You play a 5/5 that draws 1. That's turn 3. That's completely insane and an absolute high roll for these decks. What deck can play? What deck can deal with a 5/5 on turn 3? Not many, unless you're Seraphine and you generate like some nonsense answer, right? Equinox, I guess, would do it. Targon Equinox would make this a 2/3, but then still, you know, you're still ahead. You still drew 1 card. This is the card I cannot wait to build my decks around. Printing is a way of life. It's a lifestyle, and I'm here for it. I'm very happy to see Riot making a printer card just for me. Makes me happy. All right, so that were all the cards for the Darkin Finale expansion. I am extremely hyped to play with all of these cards. I am personally very excited to build decks around Aatrox as a champion. Rise as well is going to be super unique, and Kill I think is rather straightforward. Not super hyped to build decks around her, but eventually I'm pretty sure that C will be the easiest to build decks for. So you're gonna see a lot of tier 1 Kill decks when the expansion comes out. Maybe some Aatrox, and then a couple of weeks later, I'm expecting Rise to just take over the meta with the Exodia playstyle, with the Thanos Snap when he obliterates your board. Let me know what your favorite card is. Let me know what deck you're going to be building first. And as always, when the expansion releases, you can expect multiple decks every single day with all these sweet new cards. I'll see you there.